Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And so they live there under the guise of Kim Jong, whichever one's running right now. And they make their own rules. Like, I think it's said that Kim Jong Il guy or whatever has like invented golf or something like that. Like, it's just My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right. Welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? We're starting a brand new year here. It's going to be episode 56. We're going to be talking about the USB port as well as flash drives and anything connected with that. Glad to have you guys back for another year. Hoping for another good 52 weeks of finding out how things happen. This will actually be coming out on the anniversary of the first episode of HDTH, which came out on January the 2nd, 2022. And it has been a long slog to get you guys all of these topics and interesting episodes that I've brought for the last year. But let's see, what are we going to get to before we get to the episode? 7 days a week. You can find out how things happen over at the website, hdthappen.com. There you will find episode transcripts as well as pictures and videos for every episode. You'll also find a blog on there, which people have actually read and I think people are liking. I've written on subjects such as the Uvalde shooting, Takeoff's murder, Twitch's suicide, even loneliness, the holidays. I try to cover all the bases. But this, being that this is our 1 year anniversary, I was trying to think of things that I could do that would be like a celebration of some sort, but really don't have many things that I could really do. But what I thought I could do, and what I thought was just pointless before this, and I've done this for a year. I'm sure there are people who listen to me at least a little bit on somewhat of a regular basis. I thought I could at least give you a little bit more of information about myself for what it's worth. I'm not going to waste your time with too much. I don't know what I have or have not told you guys, because I talk a lot, to be honest, but I will say I think I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Originally, I went to college in a couple different places. I went to college in Baltimore, where I played college baseball at a small university, Coppin State University. There, I transferred to the University of Virginia's College of Wise. Lived and worked while I went to school for a few years. Got a degree in communication. I now live in the state capital, Richmond, Virginia. There's not that much more about me, but I thought, at least people, you listen to this guy sometimes twice a week, and you probably wonder who's behind the mic. And that's me. I like long walks on the beach. No, I don't know. I really like history, and that's why I started this podcast. I like to find out, it's cliche or corny, but I like to find out how things happen. I look at things all the time, and I just wonder how they got that way. And so this has been an outlet for me, and I really appreciate everybody who comes back week to week, or people who are finding out about it, every day. And like I said on the last episode, this past month has been the largest amount of downloads we've had all year. So it says that someone's listening, and I really hope to kind of, take that cue and take that energy and go on and try to double it up for this next year to come. But I thought so. There's not much more about me to say, or else I would tell you guys. I'm sure I'll start to divulge more personal things as we go along. But yeah, so let's move on from that to what am I watching? I just watched this movie called What We Found on Amazon Prime. It's a pretty good movie. It's about these kids who are looking for a girl at their school who has gone missing, and the police are actually working against them because of some weird like underworld drug deal sort of thing. But it's I like a good old whodunit. Always, if I've probably said it before. Kind of reminds me of like a Lifetime movie with a little more oomph to it. Like I said, it's on Amazon Prime, so it's not actually on like a basic cable or anything like that. I also just watched the movie The Invitation, which is on Netflix. It's a vampire flick, very well done. This woman gets a message from her long lost family, and spoiler alert, they are vampires. I'll leave it there. But it's definitely worth a watch if you like vampire movies. If you don't, it may not be worth such a watch for you. What am I listening to? I am always trying to give out pod recommendations to people because I know I'm always looking for stuff. I am currently listening to Are You Garbage, AYG. It's a pod where they interview comedians and other celebrities and try to figure out whether they grew up classy or trashy. It's all done in good fun. No one's, they're just kind of poking fun. They ask different questions that kind of give them an idea of your childhood and the way that you lived. And these questions really do kind of cue you into, you realize everyone had a different kind of childhood. They'll ask things like, is your butter on the counter or is it on the fridge or in the fridge, excuse me? Did you drink milk with dinner growing up? What was like the name of the street that you grew up on? What did your parents do? Different stuff like that. But it's fun. It's definitely if you wanna laugh. I watch a lot of comedy podcasts. I don't do true crime as much anymore because like I actually tweeted the other day. I feel like they're kind of falling off. They're not as interesting as they used to be. I feel like everyone thinks they can make a true crime podcast, but definitely check out Are You Garbage. I also listen to Up First with NPR. If you like NPR, then you'll love this. It's a morning news podcast they put out every morning. I don't watch a lot of news anymore. I don't know if I mentioned my major when I was telling you when I went to college. I majored in communication, also like with a journalism kind of background as well. So I've been a news junkie for a long time. So I'm kind of stepping back from that. So there's a quick maybe 15-minute podcast that you guys can listen to. Kind of gives you just a quick what's going on with the day, and it kind of moves on from there. So let's see. Our most recent mini-sode was been on Nelson Mandela. That came out this past Thursday. We learned a lot about him. We learned what his real name is. I tried to pronounce it and fail miserably. We found out also why he was in prison and that he had like 3 wives. Long pause. But yeah, if you like what you hear here, on HCTH, then be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. 5 stars if you feel so inclined. Or as I always say, 2 stars with some constructive criticism. That is always fine. But without further ado, as we're known to do, I'll get you guys out to the episode. Our story starts in October of 1969. Kind of. It was at that time that a man named Daniel Ellsberg began photocopying classified information that would later go on to be called the Pentagon Papers. In order to do so, he had to painstakingly make photocopies of over 7,000 pages and carry them around before he released them to the New York Times and the Washington Post, respectively. Imagine if he had a flash drive. How much easier that process would have been. All of that classified information could fit in his pocket. But the flash drive would not be invented for another 30 years, and the technology that would make it a household name, the USB port, would not be thought of until the early to mid-90s. I am talking about, of course, the Universal Serial Bus, the USB. By contrast, when our friend Edward Snowden made off with his documents in 2013, he did so with a flash drive, a piece of technology that was no bigger than a fun-sized candy bar. But I believe we're getting ahead of ourselves. In order to get the full picture, we must go back to the olden days, a time before USBs, a time when plugging something into your computer, a mouse, a printer, a hard drive, it required a zoo of cables. Maybe you had a PS2 connector, or the famed serial port, or an Apple desktop bus, or a DIN connector, and I'll even tell you what DIN means later. But my point is you had a lot of different cables, a lot of stuff going on back then just to do a couple things. Even if you wanted to play, let's say, games of any kind on your computer, in order to connect your joystick or anything like that, you had to have a game port. I mean, this was, if you had a thing for your computer, it also had a port. Everything had a port. But that would all change. And if you've never heard of these different ports, I mean, personally, I had only heard, truthfully, I'd never heard them actually be used, like anyone actually used their name. When I found out what a serial port was, I was surprised that I've been seeing those almost my whole life and really never thought to think, what's that called? It took until this episode here to actually even put a face with a name, if you will. But if you don't know of any of those actual cords, count yourself lucky, and that is why the USB port is so important. One of the first types of ports that was a precursor to the USB was, as I said earlier, the DIN port, which was kind of made its claim to fame on the 1981 IBM personal computer. Now, DIN actually stands for Deutsche Institute for Normung. So if you've ever wondered what DIN actually stands for, there you go. Like I said, they would be a pioneer. Also, serial ports, like I mentioned earlier, they were some of the first ones that would end up connecting different things like your mouse or your keyboard to these actual towers. And so a serial port is an interface that allows a PC to transmit or receive data one bit at a time. That's actually a big part of why USB ports were so kind of advanced, as well as they were able to send more information faster than these actual serial ports. And that's why serial ports will end up being kind of phased out as USBs come on. Serial ports are still on the market because for some sort of lower tech things, they can actually still be of use, but the majority of things these days are actually, done with USBs. But it is one of the oldest types of interfaces. And at one time was the more commonly used interface to connect printers and other external modems to a PC. And so this now will bring us to the creation of the USB, the Universal Serial Bus, which I must say I never would have thought that's what USB stood for. I don't think I ever really thought about what USB stood for. I didn't think that the B stood for bus. I definitely did not think that. But so back in 1995, about 7 companies come together to basically say, hey, okay, we need some sort of universal technology that can make it easier for everybody to kind of plug and play. The whole idea was to really, have a plug and play sort of theory behind this technology. The companies were, of course, Compaq, IBM, Intel, Microsoft, NEC, Nortel, and another company with the initials of DEC. Like I said, the goal was to make it fundamentally easier to connect external devices to PCs by replacing the multitude of connectors at the back of the current PC. And so the main guy behind this, and see, I didn't know this. I didn't know any of this. Obviously, that's why we're learning all this. But there's actually one main guy who was behind the creation of the USB, and this is really interesting when you look at the different, like the IBM model compared to like the Apple model of like creating products, because Apple also tried to create their own sort of USB type of technology, and I believe that was called the FireWire. But the problem with that is, of course, Apple wanted it to be, they wanted to charge outrageous fees for licensing to allow anybody else to use them, and it wanted to be, very Apple centric. Which, I mean, I've read Steve Jobs' biography, and if you haven't, it's a great read. That really was his whole goal, was to just have one, and that's how Apple works. It's one full, everything works with it. How can I put it? Everything with Apple works with Apple, and they kind of like it that way. But these guys over at like Compaq and IBM and Intel, they wanted to make kind of the same thing, but they wanted it to be for everybody. And so the main guy kind of got off track for a second. The main guy who created the USB is a man by the name of A.J. Butt. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's A.J.A.Y., last name B.H.U.T.T. He's an Indian guy from Baroda, and he was born in 1957. He completed his graduation in Maharaja Savijarao, got that pretty close, university. And he moved to the U.S. And went to the University of New York, the City University, like the CUNY, for his master's degree. He joined Intel in 1990 as a senior staff architect, and this guy has done a lot ever since he got there. He actually holds, I think, 132 U.S. or international patents for different types of technology that he's created since, in his over 30 years of working there. He's since retired now. But it's interesting to know, like I was talking about with the money of how Apple was trying to make money off their FireWire. I wanted to, that's why it really didn't take off anywhere outside of Apple. These guys made this, and they didn't make any money off of it. He's never made any, like a cent, 1 cent off of anything that has to do with the USB, because he made it while working for IBM. So he, it wasn't like it's not his invention, but it is his invention. So he kind of worked with all these different companies in conjunction to make a universal piece of technology that everybody could actually use. And so he set to have actually created this idea from, and it makes sense when you think about it. He loved the idea of how you could plug anything into an electric socket and it could power. You know what I mean? You plug a TV in there, you plug a refrigerator in there, you plug a printer, in there, and it can power no matter what it is. There's some sort of universal plug that every product has that makes it so that everybody can use it without there being too much going on. And it was a mix of that, and it was also, I think he said he was his own family was having trouble hooking up their printer and making it so that they could actually work. He said he would get calls from his wife all the time about, while he was at work, like, I can't print this isn't working out. It must be wild to get those kind of calls when you yourself work at IBM, and I guess he's like, yeah, if I can't even get this going in my own house, there's a problem. You know what I mean? If even we're having problems with this, then the regular layman guy who does not work at IBM must also be having these same problems. And so they make this back in the mid 90s, and it was said I think they came about with the idea, or not the idea, but with trying to make it. They agreed upon what was going to work by doing something that's called a plug fest, which I had never heard of this until quite literally today when I looked it up. But they still happen now, and it's basically they're a big festival where people who make these products get together and just try to basically plug their product into another person's product and see, okay, will this work, and how can we make it more universal so that we can all make some money off of this kind of. But that's kind of where the initial idea for the USB design came from, was I guess the Plug Fest, I think in the early 90s. The first USB compatible computer that came out was actually in 1998, and that was the Apple's iMac, which is interesting because Apple was trying to, like I said, make their own USB type device, but they realized USB was on the rise, and they had to they're always trying to be on the on the forefront. So that brings us to the actual design of the USB, and that's actually pretty interesting because there's not much to say about it. But what I realized when I was reading about it is, I thought that I was not the only person that was having the trouble with what they call the USB paradox, and that's the fact that basically 50% of the time when you put the USB in, you put it in the wrong way. I just thought it was me. I thought I'm defective. There's just everybody else seems to understand. Someone they're seeing something that I don't see, because my whole life I've been part of that 50%. If I put a USB in right now, it's gonna go in wrong. But so they were aware of that. But it turns out the reason why that is because to make the technology reversible, meaning you could put it in either way, you flip it in, and there is no upside down. If that was to be the case, it cost twice as much to actually make the product. So they basically just stuck with a one-sided design, and that's what makes the USB paradox. I didn't even know it had a name. It's like finding out that the Doppler effect, or not the Doppler effect, but what's that called? The butterfly effect, that existed. You're just like, whoa, like you just put a name on something I've been struggling with my whole life. Let's see. There's anything more about the design I want to get out before we move on to. After this, we're really going to talk about the flash drive, and then we're going to go ahead and get out of here onto the next segment. But I think one interesting part about the design of the USB and the whole idea of that is because they put all the important technology, or the expensive technology that it requires to actually go, is usually in the actual computer itself, so that you can sell a smaller, cheaper product, or whether it be the cord, or the flash drive we're about to talk about, that can then be put into that. So the expensive part is usually, like I said, in the computer, and not in the part that you have to buy, which makes it easier for now they can actually market a product that everyone can afford. I don't know why I said that twice, but so that brings us on to the flash drive. And so this is actually something that I didn't think about when I was doing the research. I don't know why. It never occurred to me. But, you have the USB, right? And then you have the flash drive. And you couldn't have the flash drive without the USB. And for whatever reason, I just assumed, and we'll kind of see that it almost does. I just assumed that whoever made the USB also made the flash drive. But that's not. We'll find that that's not exactly true. So the first patent for a USB-based PC flash disk was filed in April 1999 by an Israeli company called M Systems. They no longer exist, and they were actually acquired by SanDisk in 2006. And SanDisk is still a very large USB flash drive maker. So the first people who ever made them have been bought up by one of the larger guys in the game. So they were the first people in 1999. Later that same year, we see IBM actually create their own type as well. And there's a lot of different claims as to who actually made the first flash drive, because there's a difference between making the flash drive technology and then actually trying to sell a commercial flash drive. But there's been litigation that has basically told us who did it, and it was supposed to be the Trek 2000 International Company. They're a Singaporean company, and they actually hold not the patent, but the legal rights to say we're the first guys to actually sell a flash drive. And this is actually a really interesting piece of information. When I read this, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, or just sometimes where everything all clicks for a second. And so when they first sold the first flash drive, guess what they called it? They called it the thumb drive. Now, that may not mean much to people of a certain age. I'm not sure, because I grew up with basically watching this technology grow with me. You know what I mean? I'm 30, I'll be 32 in a couple weeks. And, you know, over the last 15 to 20 years, we've just seen the flash drive become what it is. But I've always, when I was a kid, they called them thumb drives. Like in high school, they would my teachers called them thumb drives. I couldn't understand what that was. Couldn't understand where they got that idea from. And so I don't know if they still call them that now. Maybe it's an older thing, but so the reason because of that is because the first one that was ever sold on the market in the world was called the thumb drive. I just thought that was interesting. Maybe you don't, but like I said, later that same year, IBM would actually make their first one to sell it in the United States, and theirs was called the Disk On Key, which is not as cool as the thumb drive. Fun fact about fun fact about fun drives, but fun fact about thumb drives or flash drives, they are actually said to be banned from the NSA facilities. A former NSA official told the Los Angeles Times that special permission is required to use them. And even when you do that, people still look at you funny. And so there's one guy in there who's like so against thumb drives that he's actually asked for his computer to have all his USB ports to be filled in with liquid cement, which just seems a little extra. And that is how USB ports happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. Serial ports were one of the predecessors to the USB port. USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. The USB was created in 1995. The first flash drive was invented in 1999. Things I didn't know before. And now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? All right, so for the things I didn't know before, we actually do have a couple pretty good ones. I got three, maybe a total of three for you guys. The first one is not, I don't know why I always make this stuff out to be less interesting than what I think it is, but I think it's pretty interesting. So in between 2016 and 2017, South Korea took part in what was called the Flash Drives for Freedom campaign. And so what they did was they would take all of these flash drives and they would pack them with like all this information of like the outside world and send them off to North Korea. They would have like South Korean soap operas, movies from like America, information about the outside world, global news stories, different stuff like that. And they would just sneak them into North Korea. We're talking like 10,000 flash drives, because basically, if you don't know, I imagine most people probably do, but North Korea is basically cut off from any kind of real Western media, of any sort. And so they live there under the guise of Kim Jong, whichever one's running right now, and they make their own rules. Like, I think it's said that Kim Jong Il guy or whatever has like invented golf or something like that. Like, it's just this whole, they live under these like created, constructs, which we all do, but they live under a very small one that only they kind of agree to. So with this, I just thought it was interesting that that's the way they were able to transport information, and that these guys are getting flash drives that are showing you can do so much with a flash drive. The amount of data storage is just ballooned and grown exponentially ever since they started creating them. I think now they think the largest flash drive it holds something like 2 terabytes of, and I don't think I mentioned in the earlier one, the first flash drive ever I think held 8 gigabytes. When they first made it in 1999, it held 8 gigabytes. And now, like I said, you can hold up to 2 terabytes. So that's just showing different ways that flash drives show up in our life. I thought that was pretty cool. So the next thing we're going to get to does not have much, if anything to do with the episode. And that's kind of where this segment really began all those months ago, a year ago, was that I would be doing research for stuff and then find other stuff that was just too juicy, crazy, interesting to not mention, even though it has nothing to do with a USB. And this is still in the technology realm, but this is about how Bluetooth got its name, like the actual technology of Bluetooth. So it's named after a 10th century Danish king named Harold Blatan, which I guess, or Bluton, whatever. And in English, that means Harold Bluetooth, right? And this guy had an enthusiasm for blueberries, which who doesn't? And his tooth was always seemed to be stained blue, hence the name. And he also united a lot of Scandinavia. He brought Christianity to Denmark. And so the idea is that their technology unites and connects a lot of people the same way that King Harold Bluetooth did. It's based on the analogy that they would unite the devices the same way that he united the tribes of Denmark into a single kingdom. It's a lot when you really think about, what it really gets used for. So that's how we get the Bluetooth name. And they go a little bit further. They doubled down on this. So the Bluetooth symbol is like some old English, I think they call it runed. It's like a type of writing from like Denmark or something like that. And it's basically that alphabet. If you take his two names, or the first letter from his names, H and B, you put that together, that's what the Bluetooth symbol is. So next time you look at the Bluetooth symbol, it's literally an old like English Denmarkian like alphabet that says HB for Harold Bluetooth, which was a Danish king from 1,000 years ago. That's why we do this, folks. Who knew? I didn't know. Did you know? I definitely didn't. All right, so we got one more before we get out of here. And this is getting back on the train, on the USB train. This is going to explain to you the USB icon, right? Because I read an article that was talking about, people don't know what that icon means. People know. Maybe that's also an age thing. If you see, it's ubiquitous. It's been around for 30 years. You see the USB icon, a little cord that splits off into 3, and there's little shapes at the end. You know what that means. It means you can plug a USB in there. I don't know why I'm coming to you with this gripe. When I read the article, they were just like, not everybody knows about that. I'm like, really, dude? People know. So like the idea of the icon is based off of Neptune's trident. I thought that was interesting. I did not know that. It makes a lot of sense. It's just as far as for how it looks. Right. And so the trident, actually, it symbolizes power. And the USB actually is supposed to symbolize the same thing. The power to be a single connector for multiple devices. That should be a commercial. But that's what it is. So like the power of Neptune's trident is supposed to be synonymous with the power of the USB to connect all devices with one single connector. And the different shapes at the end, the square, the circle, and the triangle, they are all to continue to drive home the point that it is universal. So next time you look at a USB symbol, I want you to think of me. First off, do that. Here I am. Hi. And think about how the power, right, of Neptune's trident. And then the next time you look at a Bluetooth symbol, I want you to think about a Danish king who just could not stop eating blueberries. Do that for me. All right, that was the first episode of the year of How Did That Happen? It is in the books, y'all. Episode 56. We learned about USB ports and the good old flash drive. I learned so much in that episode because I did not know any of this. Like I said, I didn't even know that the B in USB stands for bus. I would have thought it stood for something more sophisticated or complicated. I don't know. But that's why we do this, folks. That's why we come back week to week, hoping to find out how everything happens. That will be the goal of this podcast. We will go on for forever in a day to find out how things happen. But as always, if you like what you heard here, there is more where that came from over at hdthappen.com. As always, the written version of the episode, the transcripts will be up there in addition to photos and videos, along with the works cited that shows where I got all of this information from. And if you'd like to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, it really helps the pod grow. Give us 5 stars if you'd like. If you don't want to and want to give us 2 stars, and tell us why you don't want to give us 5 stars, love that too. But yeah, hoping for some great things to come along for this new year to come, guys. As always, thanks for pressing play, and we'll see you guys in a couple days with the next episode of Bite Size Bios.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, Saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.